Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Crystal Ross with Eating the Holy Bible. Let's go ahead and get Facebook on in here. Hello, Facebook, and hello, YouTube. We are uploading for YouTube, rebroadcasting the lesson for 1 Samuel chapter 17 of the New Living Translation of the Holy Bible. Please forgive me for my absence. It's been a while. Hope everybody's been safe during the storm and following the instructions to stay off the roads. Also, I'll be reading from a handheld Bible today. We're doing things a little bit different today while I'm still learning the setup of things. So I will be posting this. This will be an upload. So for YouTube a little bit later today, but Facebook is live for the lesson. Thank you all so much for joining me on today. My name is Crystal Ross, your teacher of the Adult Bible Study lesson. Today we will be reading from 1 Samuel chapter 17. But before we get into our lesson, we start off with song, and then we'll get into the lesson. We'll get into taking comments and summarizing what we've learned, and then we close with prayer. So I'm gonna do this as brief as possible. And today's song is I am on the battlefield for my Lord. I am on the battlefield for the Lord. Hey, I promised him that I was gonna serve him until I die. I am on the battlefield for the Lord. Sing it again. Hey, I am on the battlefield for the Lord. I am on the battlefield for my Lord. And I promise him that I'm gonna serve him until I die. I am on the battlefield for the Lord. I am on the battlefield for the Lord. I am on the battlefield for the Lord. Amen. All right. So I think that song is befitting for the lesson today. The title is David Meets Goliath. So we've talked about son David, the youngest son of Jesse. Now, David has been anointed to be king by the prophet Samuel. Hence, we are in the book of 1 Samuel, and the chapter is 17. David, I said the last lesson, was hidden by his father. He was not presented with his other brothers. I think there was 7 or 8 of them, and he was left in the field to tend the sheep. So his father knew what was going on, I believe, but he didn't include his son. So my question last time was, well, why wouldn't he include David in the lineup? Did he not think that David would be chosen for king? Okay. So we're going to talk more about David on today. We're going to learn more about his personality. Hey, guess what? Who does know who is king? And that was God. God had to talk to Samuel while he was making his selection. He said, this ain't it. You think it's he, But man looks on the outward appearance, but God look on the heart. Tell him to keep going. And Samuel said, do you have another? Is this all of your sons? And he said, well, I have my youngest son. He's out in the field tending the sheep. And Samuel said, bring him. I wanna meet him. And as soon as David approached, the Lord said, this is he. Anoint him to be king. Okay. So let's get on into the story now that we have recapped our last lesson. As a reminder, I want to go ahead and get into the lesson for today, which is coming from 1 Samuel. Having connection issues, so we're going to use the good book. This is actually 1 Year Bible for Women, NLT. But, you know, the way we are doing it, we are doing 1 chapter a day. All right, so 1 Samuel chapter 17 says, let me make sure I'm doing this right, because this whole 1 year thing, I just want the whole chapter. Forgive me, give me one moment. I want to see where this is supposed to stop, because there may be have a reading plan and then we're going further than we need to. So it's going to stop at verse 58. Okay, it does. Good. Now, I'm going to keep this interesting. The Philistines, 1 Samuel chapter 17. Hello, welcome back. Thank you for joining, Donovan. All righty, here we go. You joined just in time. It's time to get into our reading. It's 1 Samuel chapter 17 of the NLT version of the Holy Bible. Just listen along. If you cannot read, I will read to you. So it says, the Philistines, and I'm reading from the Bible today, the handheld, now mustered their army for battle and camped between Sokoh and Judah and Azekah at Ephes Damim. Saul countered by gathering his troops near the valley of Elah. So the Philistines and Israelites faced each other on opposite sides, with the valley between them. Then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was a giant of a man, measuring over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet and a coat of mail that weighed 125 pounds. He also wore bronze leggings, and he slung a bronze javelin over his back. The shaft of his spear was as heavy and as thick as a weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. So the weaver's beam is something I want to look up. An armor bearer walked ahead of him carrying a huge shield. Now, what does Goliath need with an armor bearer? So our armor bearer would carry his things. So he bore the shield. I don't know why my light went off. Oh. Okay. Not gonna be screwing. Okay, now it says he also wore, so okay. Goliath stood and shouted across to the Israelites, do you need a whole army to settle this? Choose someone to fight for you, and I will represent the Philistines. We will settle this dispute in a single combat. If your man is able to kill me, then we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel. Send me a man who will fight with me. When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. Now David was the son of a man named Jesse, an Ephrathite an Ephrathite, from Bethlehem in the land of Judah. And Jesse was an old man at that time, having 8 sons in all. Jesse's eldest son was Eliab, Abinadab, and Shammah, who had already joined Saul's army to fight the Philistines. David was the youngest of Jesse's sons. And since David's 3 eldest brothers were in the army, they stayed with Saul's forces all the time. So they were soldiers. But David went back and forth between working for Saul, playing the playing the harp. Is that when he was playing the harp for him? Was he already playing the harp for Saul to tone down that evil spirit? Okay. I've forgotten, y'all. So I do have to go back and review that today. So it says here, since David's 3 eldest brothers were in the army, they stayed with Saul's forces all the time. Help me, Holy Ghost. But David went back and forth between working for Saul and helping his father with the sheep in Bethlehem. Oh, okay. I'm ahead of myself. For 40 days, twice a day, morning and evening, the Philistine giant strutted in front of the Israelite army. One day, Jesse said to David, his father said to his son, take this half bushel of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread to your brothers. And give these 10 cuts of cheese to their captain. Oh, that's so nice. See how your brothers are getting along, and bring me back a letter from them. David's brothers were with Saul and the Israelite army. It said that already. And in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines at this time. So they're actually at war. So David left the sheep with another shepherd and set out early the next morning with the gifts. Notice he did not leave his sheep unattended. And the Bible talks about Jesus being a good shepherd. It refers to pastors as being shepherds over the flock. The sheep would be the saints. Laity. So David left the sheep with another shepherd and set out early the next morning with the gifts. He arrived at the outskirts of the camp just as the Israelite army was leaving for the battle with shouts and battle cries. Soon the Israelite and Philistine forces stood facing each other, army against army. David left his things with the keeper of supplies and hurried out to the ranks to greet his brothers. As he was walking with them, he saw Goliath, the champion from Gath, who came out from those Philistine ranks, shouting his challenge to the army of Israel. As soon as the Israelite army saw him, they began to run away in fright. Have you seen the giant? The men were asking. He comes out each day to challenge Israel. And have you heard about the huge reward? The king, pardon me, please. Has offered to anyone who kills him. The king will give him one of his daughters to wife, and his whole family will be exempted from paying taxes. So the KJV talks about not being his slaves. And we do remember in the previous chapter where Samuel warned Israel, if you take on a king now, if you make yourself king, you will become his slaves. David talked to some others standing there to verify the report. What will a man get for killing this Philistine and putting an end to his abuse of Israel? He asked them. Who is the pagan Philistine anyway that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God? And David received the same reply as before. So that's how you know the report is true, because it is confirmed with other warriors. What you've been hearing is true. That is the reward for killing the giant. But when David's eldest brother Eliab heard David talking to the men, he was angry. What are you doing here anyway? He demanded, what about those few sheep you were supposed to be tending to? I know your pride and your dishonesty. You just want to see the battle, you snoopy thing. What have I done now? David replied. I was only asking a question. He walked over to some others and asked them the same thing and received the same answer. So it sounded like the third time he asked. Then David's question was reported to the king Saul, and King Saul sent for him. So he's asked 3 times, word about David, asking the king about the reward. Got back to the king. And King Saul sent for him. And David says this, don't worry about a thing. Don't you worry about a thing. How many know every little thing is gonna be all right? He told him, don't you worry. No, now, about a thing. Tell your girl, my world, everything is gonna be all right. Tell that girl she gonna be mine now. Every little thing is gonna be all right. I'm gonna go out to the Philistine. Is gonna be a fight. I'm gonna win the battle. We'll win the war. And we'll win it in the name of the Lord. So every little thing, hey, it's gonna be all right. Tell your brother, your sister, and your pa. Okay, let me stop. All right, let's get back to the lesson. So he says, don't you worry now about a thing. David told Saul that. He said, I'll go fight this Philistine. Don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. There is no way that you can go up against this Philistine. You're only a boy. And he has been in this army since he was a boy. So Goliath been fighting since he was a kid. He must have been a big kid. But David persisted. I have been taking care of my father's sheep, he said. When a lion or bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and take the lamb from its mouth. Now that was the lion and the bear. If the animals turn on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. So using like a bat. I have done this to both lions and to bears. All right. And I will do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. That lets you know that this has angered him, and he knows that he must fight in the name of the Lord. The Lord who saved me from the claws of the lion and the bear will save me too from this Philistine. Saul finally consented. All right, go on ahead, he said, and may the Lord be with you. Then Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet, and a coat of mail that David put on. He strapped the sword over it and took a step or two to see what it was like, for he had never wore such things before. Remember, he was a shepherd. I can't go in these, he protested. I am not used to them. So he took them off again. He picked up 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them into his shepherd's bag. Then, armed only with a shepherd's staff and a sling, he started across to fight Goliath. Goliath walked out toward David with his shield bearer ahead of him, sneering in contempt at this ruddy-faced boy. Am I a dog, he roared at David, that you come at me with a stick? And he cursed David by the name of his gods. Come over here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and to the wild animals, Goliath yelled. David shouted in reply, you come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, But I come to you in the name of the Lord God Almighty, of the armies of Israel, in which you have defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head. And then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And everyone will know that the Lord does not need no weapons to rescue his people. And that is true. That is correct. And he has shown himself before like that to the Israelites, making the opposing forces to draw themselves into confusion and to turn upon each other with their own sword in battle. Or he'll rain some hail on them or whatever he needs to do. It is his battle and not ours. The Lord will give you unto us. So that very thing that Goliath was saying would be David's portion if he come at him. He said, I tell you what, yours too if you come at me. As Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him, reaching into his shepherd's bag and taking out a stone. He hurled it from his sling and hit the Philistine in his forehead. The stone sank in, and Goliath stumbled and fell face down toward the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine giant with only a stone and a sling. And since he had no sword, he ran over and pulled Goliath's sword from his sheath. David used it to kill the giant and cut off his head. When the Philistines saw that their champion was indeed, he was dead, they turned and ran. It says the Israelites gave a great shout of triumph and rushed after the Philistines, chasing them as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron. The bodies of the dead and wounded Philistines were strewn all over the road. Along the road from Sharaim as far as Gath and Ekron. Then the Israelite army returned and plundered the deserted Philistine camp. So whatever they could find, they took. David took Goliath's head to Jerusalem, but he stored the Philistines' armor in his own tent. So the other version says he took the sword. Help me. The KJV version says that after David threw the stone from the sling at the head of Goliath, yes, it sank in, but then after he fell unconscious, pretty much, he went and stood on top of Goliath, drew his sword from the sheath, and stabbed him with it, and to make sure that he's dead, and then he cut off his head. And then he took it back with him. And it says, and it also said that he put his armor into his tent. So he's holding the head. Now Saul watched David go out to fight Goliath. He asked Abner, the general of his army, Abner, whose son is this? I really don't know, Abner said. Well, go find out, the king told him. After David had killed Goliath, Abner brought him to Saul with the Philistine's head still in his hand. I hope that you can hear me, that the reception is good. If not, please let me know. But I am recording for upload on YouTube, which will be passed along if this is not smooth sailing on Facebook. Okay, it says, no, get my light back. Wake up. Okay, turn it down a little bit. We're almost done. And then it says, tell me, it says the Philistine's head was still in his hand when he came to meet the king. He says, well, Tell me your name. Excuse me. He says, tell me about your father, my boy, Saul said. And this is this version here. This is NLT, but y'all, and these books be stated a little bit different every time. And it says, tell me about your father, my boy. He says, his name is Jesse, and we live in Bethlehem. After David had finished talking with Saul, he met Jonathan, the king's son. See, this is something I didn't see in the phone version. There was an immediate bond of love between them. So I knew that was missing. And they became the best of friends. Guys can have guy friends. From that day on, Saul kept David with him at the palace, and he wouldn't let him return home. That's extramus, because I did not see that in my phone version, nor the internet version. I don't know. This is the this micro Bible is a handheld KJV full of Old and New Testament, and I'm not sure if it's in there, but the KJV on my phone, I did not see that, but I knew the story. I'd heard it before, read it before. All right. Oh, yeah. Okay. So that does conclude the reading of scripture. It is, let me look at the time. It is 2:04 p.m., 2/17/2021. Happy Thursday. Happy Wednesday. Happy Hump Day Wednesday. We are in the midst of the middle of the week. They call it Hump Day because we are just over the hump. Starting from Sunday, Monday, Tuesdays, Wednesday, we have Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So it's time to get into what we've learned today, to summarize and to comment about what we've learned. And what I wanted to go over was David, the new king. The new king behind, secretly set up by prophet Samuel, the same man who anointed King Saul under God's judgment and selection. King Saul has been not living up to his position because he's disobedient. Saul can't follow instructions because when Saul sees something that he likes, he keeps it when it's actually no good. So when the Lord told Saul, I need you to go and destroy all these people and their livestock and leave nothing. God don't need no extra animals. If he said destroy it, that means you got enough. I'm seeing greed. He said all the women's, the children's, and their daddies, I want you to destroy them all. And before, I don't know, the interruption with the connectivity, I was saying, well, why the children's? Why the children if they ain't done nothing? Well, children aspire to be like their parents. I do not know. Because this day and time is a whole different day and time. And Jesus said he loved little children. So, but the instructions were, okay, and I can tell you historically, we do know that this has been something that the Israelites dealt this way amongst themselves if they needed to. But how do I say this? When they were taking over a nation, they often only got to keep like the virgins for themselves. It's really all about them. It's like the outer nations already had their own thing going. The outer nations, actually, we have seen an infiltration in the Israelite nation of tribe of Benjamin, who was the youngest tribe of the youngest son of Jacob. of Joseph, of Jacob, Joseph's youngest brother who had kids now in their tribe, their families. So we're seeing homosexuality. And Benjamin decided to fight Israel. They didn't want to give up the man who sought to sleep with the man who gave up his wife because he said, I ain't going out there. And he pushed his wife out the door because she had cheated on him. Well, that goes to show you how they feel about infidelity in a marriage. He said, cut it, skirt, cut it. Okay. He pushed her out the door. I think their relationship was already strained at the bit because when they were returning on their journey back to his house from where he retrieved her from the daddy's house where she was staying, it doesn't say they had a conversation. It didn't talk about them. They just, when they were back, he pushed her out the door. So, the Lord wanted to do away with homosexuality, but the tribe of Benjamin stood up to cover it. So it must have been a whole lot of that stuff. And God has destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah over homosexuality. He burnt the whole town with brimstone, fire and brimstone. Okay, so which sounds like hell. It was over for them. Okay, so these men did the same thing when they attacked. I done got out, but I'm gonna come back because this is where I'm being led. These men did the same thing in Sodom and Gomorrah to Lot, who was Abraham's son? Lot, who did that to, well, I remember Lot had some kids, some daughters who had sons-in-laws, and Lot had, the Lord sent angels to retrieve Lot because the men of the town said, bring him out, we want to sleep with him. And I think Lot was staying at somebody's house. And they said, we saw him. The men that came in, the man that they started beating up on the door trying to get in. And the angels had to cast them with blindness just to get them out of town. They didn't sleep the night. Can't remember how they got there. Whose guess they were. But anyways, I don't know if it was just where they stopped by or where they was staying, but Sodom and Gomorrah stunk in the nostrils of God. Okay, so He dealt with that. So we do know that God deals with sin and how He deals with it. So He did not want infiltration.